Old cities were walled, and the reason for that was because they were places of wealth, and if you didn't put walls around them, then other people would come in and steal everything and kill you. So like having some walls was a good idea, like the same as having walls in your house is a good idea. Walls between your rooms are a good idea, or borders between categories are a good idea. And so part of the way you simplify the world is by building walls around your space, because then a whole bunch of things can't come in, and so you don't even have to think about them. It's not conceptual, it's practical. And so, and you know, one of the things I think I figured out recently is the fundamental political difference between people. And it looks to me like the fundamental political difference is how many walls should there be around your stuff? And the ultimate liberal answer is 0. And the ultimate conservative answer is, well, bring on those walls, man. And what's interesting about both those perspectives, first of all, is that there's temperamental contributions to them, and second, that they're both valid. So one of the mysteries, I believe, that permeates psychometric psychology right now is why the temperamental factors that influence politics are those particular temperamental factors. So there's 5, let's say, right? This classic big 5: extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness. Well, the biggest predictors of political allegiance, forget about the politically correct types for a minute, but on the liberal to conservative axis is that the liberals are low in conscientiousness and high in openness, and the conservatives are high in conscientiousness and low in openness. And so then you think, well, why those two traits? That's the first question. And the second question is, why those two traits together, given that they're not very highly correlated, right? They're really quite independent. So why do they co-vary along the political axis? And I think this is the reason. I think it's exactly that, is that open people like to live on the periphery of boundaries. And they like to break boundaries between things, because interesting things happen when you think a different way, when you think outside of the box, so to speak. That's what open people do. They always think outside of the box, no matter what box you put them in. You know, and sometimes you meet people that are so open that they're completely disorganized. Their thought process is almost completely associational, like a dreamer. They just jump from one thing to another, and they're very interesting to talk to. It's very hard for those people to get their lives together, because they're interested in absolutely everything, and their attention just flits all over the place. And so they're open, and that actually does go along with higher intelligence, generally speaking. So, and then if they're low in conscientiousness, they don't see any utility in order. And order, like orderly people, because that's part of conscientiousness and the biggest determiner of political belief in the conscientious domain, the orderly people like to have everything in its separate place and properly structured. And so, you know, their world is box, inside a shelf of boxes, and then that shelf of boxes is inside another box, and all those boxes are nice and neat and tight, nothing inside them is touching, and everything in every box is the same thing. And you know, you can see you can see the utility in that, and that, as far as we've been able to tell, is also associated with disgust sensitivity. And people are disgusted, generally speaking, when things that shouldn't be touching are touching, like something horrible stuck to you, for example. That produces a very visceral sense of disgust. And it's a boundary violation, because that's what disgust is. It indexes a boundary violation. And how separate people should be from one another as individuals or in groups is an entirely debatable issue, because there's huge advantages when people mingle and mix, and there's huge dangers when people mingle and mix. And so at some point you say, well, the dangers are overwhelming the positives, and at another point you say, well, the positives are overwhelming the dangers, and you have a continual argument about that with yourself, but more importantly with people who have different temperament than you. You know, and the terrible temptation is to assume that only those people who have your temperament are correct. And that's just, those other temperaments wouldn't exist if that was true. I mean, if you look at it from, just say if you look at it from a strictly biological perspective.